Everybody, welcome back to my channel. I want to talk about the popularity of goth fashion and how prevalent it is, not just inside alternative subcultures as a whole, but outside as well. You'll find that there's a lot of people who like to kind of don the goth aesthetic, whether it be hints of macabre or just full-on goth attire, and they will openly claim, most of them at least, will openly claim that they have no affiliation with the subculture. It's just, it's the way that they choose to express themselves aesthetically. And that's okay, there's nothing wrong with that. But what I find is amongst baby bats, when you have so much focus on goth fashion, it makes them even more pressure to kind of carve out their identity. When you have a lot of baby bats and younger goths that have access to higher end fashion brands, like Killstar, like Punk Rave, Dark in Love. I'm sure there's others that I'm not remembering. I guess pretty much everything on Dolls Kill. I know I particularly do like a lot of things that Widow does, but I only shop there secondhand, meaning that I get my Dolls Kill stuff. I'll get it on Poshmark, Depop. I haven't shopped on Vinted yet, but I digress. You have this emphasis on really carving out your identity and figuring out who you are as a baby bat. And fashionably, it applies like a lot of pressure to them that they really have to choose their aesthetic. And you'll have a lot of these people, these younger goths and baby bats who do have access to this stuff that kind of set a precedent, whether they say it or not. So you'll have people that are posting these images online, they'll have TikToks, they'll have other kind of social medias, and they have this really larger than life physical presence where they look great. Great hair, great makeup, they're wearing the latest and greatest in goth finery, but maybe the baby bat that's watching this, they don't particularly like it. It doesn't really feel like them, but they feel pressured to look like that. And I've noticed that there are a lot of people who are actually kind of putting that pressure on them. There are a lot of young goths, new goths, baby bats, and they have this kind of persona to where they don the aesthetic, but I don't want to say to the extreme, but they are very much kitted out in full goth attire from head to toe. They have the shoes, they have the hosiery, they have the dresses and the makeup, the hair, everything. And when you have a younger goth who's presented with this image, it makes them feel very much pressured to look that way. And not only by way of just kind of taking it in visually, but a lot of times the fashion goth will say it out loud. You're not a real goth, look at you. You're wearing a t-shirt. You do not look goth, you do not read goth, and the reason you're not looking and reading goth to me is because you're not wearing the most expensive goth attire, and that in itself will really cause a baby bat to question their own identity. I would be lying if I said that this kind of thing didn't happen when I was younger, but it did not happen to this degree or on this scale. We didn't have access to this many people. We only knew the people within our circle, and then the people that were kind of in the goth scene and we didn't necessarily associate with. Let's say if we went to a club or a concert or some event where everybody was, and that's how we really had access to everyone else. But when you have the internet and you kind of add that to the equation, you are increasing the amount of people that you have access to and have access to you exponentially and more. So you have so much more pressure on the baby bat to kind of choose an identity based upon their look, and it makes them question themselves. And I know I myself, I really did question my identity, and I didn't feel authentic because I didn't look like the other goths at the club. They were older than me, they had access to better clothes, some of them worked at a store called Religious Sex, therefore they got their employee discount, and given what those clothes cost, I've been in that store, all of their paycheck must have, they had to have had a second job, because all of their paycheck had to have gone on the things that I would see them wearing, because there's no way a mere mortal could afford that stuff. Even today, you would have to use Afterpay for the next like 20 years. It was bad. What it did was it caused a lot of DIY, and that's why you really did see a lot of ingenuity and a lot of creativity and a lot of DIY when it came to goths back in the day. So much of our personality and our creativity went into the things that we wore, because it wasn't as easy as just choosing like a kind of goth in a box outfit. Like everything is so obvious now. And what I mean by obvious is that like you could just get a regular tank top that already has spider webs woven into it. It has bats, it has onks. It is like ready-made goth right there. And have that. So we had to be a lot more creative when we kind of put ourselves together. But the thing is, we loved every minute of it. We knew that we put every inch of ourselves into every single look that we created, and it was us. It was part of who we were. And you would just see people's personalities kind of reflected in everything that they wore. I personally, I loved cameos. I used to collect them, cameos and rosary beads. So I would just be loaded up with cameos and rosaries and all of these different things, crosses all over the place. But it was always by way of accessories. So when you were a young goth, even an older goth, and you didn't have access to this stuff, what we really did was we focused on what we could get. And a lot of what we could get was what everyone else could get, only we got it in black. We would shop in the regular stores that everyone else shopped in, or we'd go to the thrift stores, but everything we found was so basic. After you strip away all their carefully cultivated accessories and other little bits and pieces that they put together, you would be surprised to find yourself staring at the very canvas they started with, and that canvas is the most basic thing that you have ever seen because it came from a regular store that everyone and their mom shopped at, or a thrift store. And that's when you come to realize that that entire elaborate look that you thought was this most amazingly put together outfit was nothing more than this person's accessories, what they brought to it. And I would say that that's 80s and 90s goth fashion perfectly summarized. It really was what we brought to the table because we let our accessories speak for us. Because everybody's look was so different, but to an outsider, I would probably say that it would look the same. When you're inside the subculture, you can see all the nuances and all the differences, but to everyone outside the subculture, they just, oh, a bunch of people are wearing black. And that's kind of really what they saw, but there was so much more to it. When you're inside, I think it's something that older goths really need to help impart to babybats, because there are a lot of babybats running around with imposter syndrome, worried about kind of what they should look like, maybe even running around in clothes that do not feel in any way intrinsic to them as human beings, but they're wearing it because they feel like they have to. And it's really is a costume at that point. Bringing back the whole concept of not only just DIY, but letting your accessories speak for you is really going to help the babybat or the individual find their personal style. Because fashion, what we put on, even if it's something as basic as a t-shirt, it's something that represents us. We are representing ourselves. But if you're wearing something that's not you, you're not representing yourself. So it's really important that you find your identity within the accessories. And I think like a really good way to go about that, somebody literally just, it's so funny because somebody just tagged me in something on Instagram today where it was like this quick kind of video of somebody explaining what it must be like as a young goth who is only focused on fast fashion because that's all they can really find, walking into a thrift store for the first time and what they think they're going to find versus what they do find, and that kind of culture shock that happens. And the culture shock that happens is they're expecting a look that's ready-made. They're expecting it to be kind of done for them, and come to find that you're going to find the most basic of things, and now it's up to you. Your personality has to be the thing that shines through and actually makes the look speak for itself. It's your accessories that do it. When I was a teenager in the 90s, there were a lot of goth kind of jewelry brands, most notably Alchemy Gothic, which I loved, adored, couldn't really afford it. I had this one necklace that I was able to get with my Sweet 16 money. It was so beautiful. I've been looking for it ever since. And I remember there was one picture of me wearing it, and you know the way friends unfriended each other back in the 90s, they would just like scribble your face out of a picture, or they would like rip it up and throw it away. That's how they unfriended you. They destroyed your memories, which is way worse. But I digress. So since we couldn't afford a lot of those things, where our accessories really would come from, our jewelry, were things that we put together from the pet store, the hardware store, and thrift stores. So a lot of the guys wore the dog collars. The girls, we wore cat collars because they were a little bit thinner. And I remember I had this really thin little, I think it was either for a small dog or a cat. Can't remember. But if you've seen this picture before, I'm wearing it. It was a leather collar. I wore it every single day. It had silver studs on it. And I drilled a little hole right in the front, and I hung this cross. It was this really pretty little ornate cross that I had, and I hung it from it. And that was my favorite necklace. But the cross came from a thrift store. The collar obviously came from a pet store. And the guys, they would get things like wire in like metal, like straight metal, and then black, and then they would wrap those up their arms, kind of reminiscent of Trent Reznor early like March of the Pigs, Downward Spiral days. And that was kind of the look that they put together. So for the guys, it was more Trent Reznor, but I think for the girls, style icon-wise, we looked more toward people like Susie Sue and Switchblade Symphony. So it was kind of this odd mixture of that kind of S&M bondage gear that Susie used to wear mixed with ripped t-shirts, but then the Kindergoth look that Switchblade Symphony kind of had. So we mishmashed those things together, and obviously vintage slips helped a lot, and that was kind of how we put those looks together. In order to get those looks to work, what we really had to do was we had to accessorize the crap out of it. But obviously a lot of the things that Susie Sue wore, a lot of things that you would find, they were expensive. You would go to Trash and Vaudeville and you'd be expected to drop like 100 easily. We didn't have that. So we had to get a lot more creative, and by getting creative with it, it really did make everybody's style a lot more individual. And it wasn't just based on your personality, it was also based on your skill level with DIY. So you could tell the people that were really good at it and the people that weren't so great at it. But even though, you know, you weren't that great at it, didn't mean that what came from it wasn't something that was really unique and fun and interesting. So the thing is, nowadays, things are a lot easier where the looks are created for you, just pretty much select and buy. And not only did we not have online shopping, but we also didn't have that. We were kind of forced to be more creative, because when you didn't have the money to do it, even if you did, you still had to get creative with it. You know, you had this full goth look cultivated, which would cost you like easily a couple $100s, but you still had to bring more to it to make it work. But nowadays it's different. And when your hand is forced, and I use that term loosely because we did have no choice, that's true, but when you say forced, it implies that like we hated every moment of it. We didn't. We loved DIY, and we loved the concept of like looking for accessories and cultivating these looks, because it was almost like it was an art form and it was expressing ourselves. And that was really a lot of what goth was back in the day. It wasn't just about the music, whereas, I mean, yes, it's a music-based subculture, but it was also about expressing ourselves. And we expressed ourselves verbally. We were very, very vocal. We were very vocal, very verbal. We loved to communicate. We're big communicators, even communicating by way of not speaking at all. We would communicate by way of mixtape. We would communicate by way of just a ton of people just piling into a room, laying on the bed. They would do this at my house all the time. We would lie on my bed, turn the lights off, and we would just put on one of our favorite albums, whatever the album of the week happened to be, and we would just lay there and communicate by saying nothing at all. To maybe some, nowadays it might sound a little bit lame, but I miss those days, because I've become so reliant on technology. When I'm laying in bed to go to sleep, I'm scrolling on my phone. I'm doom scrolling to get tired, to fall asleep. And I notice myself going for my phone or going for my laptop, and I hate that, because I remember back in the day, I would just stare. We would stare and lose ourselves in just creative thought. You could just sit there, listen to a song, and disappear. Be with your friends and just enjoy the moment, talk to each other. And I miss those days where I could just stare and not be bored. I need to pick up a phone. Like those moments where I would have just kind of disassociated and listened to a song, instead I got my phone. So I do miss that. I do miss those days. I think it would be really good to kind of introduce not really the concept of disassociating to baby bats, but showing them that there's more inside them that they realize. If you're a baby bat, I say that to you. There is more going on inside you, inside here, than you truly realize, because you're kind of forced to emulate other people in sort of a way to fit in. And it's not really about that. If you allow yourself that time, disconnect from the internet just for a little while, put on some of your favorite music, put on your favorite movies, and just really immerse yourself in that. Allow yourself to think unjaded by other people and their ideas. Focus on yourself, draw, write, try free writing, and you'll be surprised at what you find in there. Go to a thrift store, walk around. You know how they have those bags of accessories? They have these bags and it's just loaded up with like different necklaces and costume jewelry and tons of different things. Really look at them. Go through the racks and try to imagine. I'm going to tell you this weird habit that I used to have. I had this weird fixation and hobby when I was a baby bat, and it was for years that I did this. So my mother used to get clothing catalogs delivered to the house, and it was all like kind of standard basic farty clothes, like nothing that I would go through and be like, oh wow, I really want to order this. I used to do that with the Delia's catalog. I used to love the Delia's catalog. Couldn't afford anything in it, but I still got the catalog. So I would go through these catalogs, and this is what I would do. I'd have a pen. I would have a black pen, and I would pick things. I would say, okay, I would set myself this challenge. You have your own accessories, you have your own boots and hosiery. What you need to do is you have to go through this entire catalog, and you have to cultivate a whole goth look that you can wear to, like, say, the Bat Cave to congregate amongst, like, the OGs. And that was my favorite thing to do. And I would put on, like, Faith in the Muse, and I'd be laying on my bed, and I would have this pen, and I'd be going through choosing things. And I would even be drawing goth makeup on the models just to kind of, like, help give myself, like, put myself in that mindset. And I would select outfits, and I would put together these looks. God, that was cheesy. But I had fun doing that. It kind of shows you what's in there and what you're capable of and what you can do. Because it's not about, you know, what you can find online. It's not about, like, going on Killstar or going on Dolls Kill and finding all of these different things that, you know, that's ready-made and there for you. It was about so much more. It was about what's going on in here. What do you feel? And the things that we wore were representative of who we were and how we felt. Who we were as people and how we were feeling at that moment. Because we didn't have subgenres when it came to fashion. Like, one day you'd be dressed ethereal, the next day you'd be dressed in PVC, because that is what you were feeling at the time, because that was the music you were listening to. So music reflected so much in the way that we looked, and we would swap that out by way of accessories. So you could have the same outfit, same basic black outfit that you got from the most basic ass store in the mall that everyone else shops at. But you could accessorize it in different ways to suit how you're feeling that day, or to represent what's in your heart at that moment. And you can pretty much tell what somebody's been listening to by way of, like, how they accessorize their clothes or the way that they look. These were sent to me by an independent jewelry designer by the name of Junkyard Bats. I put the link in the description. I've worn the rosaries probably about 100 times already, and I have to say that compared to my other rosaries, these are very heavy. So you can see the difference in quality. I guess that's kind of the difference in me getting my rosary beads from the thrift store and eBay. Lesson learned. I'm wearing the bat necklace in the video, and I love the little accents like the crystal blood drops and the symmetrical bats, as opposed to the other things I tend to wear, which happens to have, like, kind of an asymmetrical quality. I love bats. The piece with the larger crystal, I'm pretty sure is a home decor piece. However, anything is jewelry if you dare to wear it. And there we go. This is the one that I think might be homeware. Right here. However, Junkyard Bats also sent this. And I'm kind of notorious for turning things that aren't jewelry into jewelry. I'm gonna do that right now. I'm pretty sure that this is meant to be kind of a wall hanging sort of decorative thing, but I am digging this as a necklace. And I think I would probably wear it as a necklace instead. So that's a really important principle when you're learning to kind of cultivate your own look by way of your own personality and kind of find yourself that way, is seeing things beyond their purpose, using things beyond what they're actually intended for. Like these. These are tights. I wear them all the time. I do wash them, but they're tights. They weren't intended to be worn this way, but they are, because I cut the feet off and I cut the crotch out, and now it's a shirt. So it's seeing things beyond their purpose and understanding that just because this thing is designated for one thing, it doesn't mean that you can't use it for something else. Because if it looks good and it feels right to you, who says you can't do it? And there's a lot of trial and error. Yes, you might look back and see some pictures of yourself wearing things where you're like, what the hell was I thinking? But you know what? That's your journey. That's your experience. At least you tried it. Sometimes it is better to regret the things that you did rather than the things that you didn't do. If you, as a baby bat or a young goth, you find yourself in a situation where you're amongst a group of people who reject you for who you are and tell you that you have to change and dress a certain way to be accepted within their group, it doesn't mean that goth is not for you. And that's a lot of what happens to a lot of young people. They feel like, okay, well, I'm being rejected. It means that I'm not who I think I am, and it like causes this huge like identity crisis. It does not mean that goth is not for you and you are not a goth. It means that those goths are not for you. And it most likely also means that it's a phase for them. Because people who are like that, when they focus so much on the fashion, and they reject others and they force that upon other people, it's usually people that are doing it by way of a trend. And give it 5 years, they'll probably be on to the next thing while you are still very much a goth. So it's important to learn to distinguish the difference between people who are just like every other kind of crew politic popular kid in school with some fishnets. Gotta learn the difference, because there are people who aren't really necessarily true parts of the subculture, but they definitely like to police it like they are. And they take true people, genuine people, who just because they don't fit a certain physical criteria, and they just push them away. It's a shame, because a lot of young people go through the whole kind of identity situation where it's like, well, I really thought I was a goth. I love this music. I love everything about this. This is who, this is where I feel like I belong, but they reject me, so who the hell am I? You dodged a bullet by being rejected by those people, because they're not genuine people. Anybody that tells you that you need to change are not genuine people. So it's important that you kind of take the time, disconnect, find who you are, and learn how to express yourself. Find that creativity that's in there, because it is in there. You just have to find it. I think that when we get spoiled so much, like I said with myself, when it comes to technology, when we get spoiled with so much choice, it tends to cause that part of you, that creative part, to degrade. And I have definitely felt the degradation by way of my creativity. It's taken a hit. And that's why I've started designing clothes again. And I have my Etsy shop active again, and I've been putting things in there, because that's a skill I don't want to lose. And I don't want to become so spoiled to where I don't necessarily do that anymore. And I don't want to lose that. I don't want to lose that part of myself, because it was always a really big part of myself. And I like being able to be creative. And I like being able to share that with you. But I hope this video has been helpful. And until next time. Bye.